Welcome into King Whale's album review party. Today, again, with my co-host Ty. Say hello to the people.
How you doing, people?
How you doing, people? Today we are discussing a very, very important album to us. And that is Ology by Gallant. And this album came out back in 2016.
Hmm.
2016 was such a great year for music. Like, what a
Excellent year.
powerhouse year, you know? It's the same year that Coloring Book came out, a bunch of other, but
Hmm.
Ology
We had
just
Lemonade, and
Lemonade,
then
exactly.
for myself, we had the Red Hot Chili Peppers come back from a good long hiatus with
That too. Yeah,
hmm
yeah. For me, it's like I remember 2013 was like a really good year for music too, because I think Black Radio 2 came out by Robert Glasper. I really love John Legend's Love in the Future album. And then feels like 2016, it was another one of those just powerhouse music years. I mean, you
hmm
look at like the Grammy nominations for R&B albums, it was Ology, which is very
hmm
well founded, Lemonade, Malibu by Anderson .Paak. Like this is a powerhouse year.
I forgot that Malibu came out that year. That's such a great album.
My gosh. But as great as those albums were, we are here to talk about Ology by Gallant because,
This album,
it's hard going up against Lemonade by Beyonce, but I think it definitely should have been in the conversation to win a
for
Grammy.
for us definitely it hits that spot. I think a little more personally. I think
Hmm.
this was an album, I think fundamentally for you and I, it's something that we got to talking more seriously about our conversations around music
Hmm.
was with Gallantology.
And I remember when it first came out because did you get it through the record club that you were a part of?
Yes, I think I mentioned it before, but
Okay.
I first discovered this through this company, which I don't remember if they're still active. They're called Vinyl Monkey, and they were great because they would send you a mystery curated album every month. And one month was Gallantology. It's how I had first heard about him. I was starting to get into record collecting. I was very excited about it, and immediately blew me away.
Yeah. And I remember like I think I was it's weird because like I'm obviously a huge fan of Lupe Fiasco. We just went over drill music in Zion. When this
Mhm.
came out in 2016, I mean, I was a Lupe, like he's been my number one favorite artist since 2010. So like you think the like deep lyrical like content would have resonated with me. But for some reason in 2016, I was like, I mean, this album is okay. Like, I didn't really get it. I felt like I just didn't get it. And it wasn't until like 2 or 3 years later on a re-listen, I was like, bro, this is one of the best albums I have ever heard. And it might be one of the
Mhm.
greatest R&B albums of all time. Like
Mhm.
that good. That good.
Really amazing. I think, and this was Gallant had an interesting start because before this album even came out, a couple years prior, he had his EP Zebra, and he had actually spent a lot of time opening and touring with Sufjan Stevens, which is a very interesting pair, the two
Hmm.
of them and their stylings, but they work really well, and that's where he first launched his first single from this album with Weight in Gold. And then he came out with such a roaring hit. Like looking back, there was a lot of hype written about Gallant with his first R&B album and
Hmm.
with him releasing an album for the first time. And I feel like it's died down a little bit. Like he doesn't seem to be in the conversation at all, which is such a shame
It
because
is.
I don't think he's gone anywhere. He's still here.
Yeah. I think so. Like, I think to me, this album, like, I think it would have been because like Sweet Insomnia came out in 2019, which is
Mhm.
about the time where I think it was before Sweet Insomnia came out and I re-listened to Ology. And that's when I discovered like how groundbreaking it is because the topics that it touches on, you just don't hear in R&B music. And to
Mhm.
me, I think it's kind of weird, but it's almost like if Gallant had come out with Sweet Insomnia, which felt like just like it was a good R&B album, but it felt like almost safe, very very typical R&B. If
Mhm.
Ology had been like his sophomore album, you know what I mean?
Mm,
Like that would have, I think that would have rocketed him because since it's his first album, people kind of think that like, oh, Gallant, he's this like deep introspective R&B artist. Not
mhm,
like he's an R&B artist that can get introspective because he's really an R&B artist that can get introspective. But since
mhm,
Ology was his debut album, it almost kind of puts him into like a he's like a thinker, you know. And he has Sweet Insomnia is just a great listening album, great
mhm,
romantic evening album. And I think had he like if those releases were switched, it would have been like, whoa, I didn't know Gallant could do this. And he would
mhm.
be like in a whole nother arena right now.
Yeah, that's an interesting point because Ology feels like it is very different from a lot of R&B, especially for, we
Mm-hmm.
were talking a little bit about this before, but for the time it came out, like
Mm-hmm.
2016, it feels like it really captured that time frame for talking about such heavy subject matter that is very different from R&B, but still capturing a lot of the poetry that comes into a really good R&B lick or lyric that will come out. And then two, the like the musical influences on tracks like Miyazaki or Perkajizik having a very house or electronic
Yeah.
feel influence to it is so
Mm-hmm.
unique that I still haven't heard a whole lot that sounds quite like what Gallant's doing.
No, I mean I've never heard an album that does that. And like there are so many things because it's still an R&B album, which I think is the best part because, you know, Gallant doesn't get away from that. The melodies, the licks, the production, it's still very R&B. It's got a little more you know, synthesized instruments than
Mhm,
a lot of R&B does. Like, you know, you don't really hear like just the normal piano and guitar on tracks. You like you can tell like these songs were produced. It didn't really sound like he was recording them with the band. So it's definitely like
mhm,
more alternative R&B production tracks, but the licks and the melodies are so R&B focused. Like on that one song, Bone and Tissue, when he goes up, tell me how I like that's an R&B lick because you use it so that way the R&B artist can get their vibrato out. And like you can tell he's just taking in just you know normal R&B music and he's adding such deep subject matter talking about you know we talked about a lot of the themes on the album like religion, mental health, delving into yourself, trying to you know discover what makes you you as a person. You know most R&B
mhm,
songs are just kind of like hey, we're in love or you broke my heart. You know, it's
mhm,
usually not that groundbreaking. And if you look at like all the nominations for Grammy artists, like
mhm.
the past like yeah, Gallant went up against Lemonade and Ology went up against Lemonade, which is very hard competition. But like you
How do
look at
you,
all the
yeah.
ones that beat, I mean you look at all the albums that won the year before, 3 years before and 3 years later, I'd argue that Ology is superior than all the nominations and all the winners combined.
Mhm. I think a lot of the winners, and this please is not a me saying that any lyricism is necessarily bad, but I think he's doing something that is so unheard of for this specific time in this genre to be
Mhm.
expanding it that makes it really stand out for R&B. That just makes it so special. Because I feel like a lot of like the surrounding albums, like say the Thundercat in 2020, where a lot of the like the beauty and the quality comes from what they're doing like sonically, what they're doing with the production is so incredible that it wins. I think what makes Gallant stand out is just solid poetry
Yeah.
with his lyrics.
Hmm. Yeah, because it's not necessarily the music that really makes this album stand out. It's completely Gallant's incredible voice and his poetry that he's speaking with. Because, and again, don't get me wrong, the music is incredible. It's just not necessarily trailblazing. Like the music is very
Sure.
good. It complements his voice in a beautiful manner, and it
Mhm.
allows his voice to shine, which is what I think exactly this album needs. And it's kind of like the way I think about Sweet Insomnia versus Ology, it's like imagine if Christopher Nolan had come out with like The Dark Knight and then Batman Begins. It's like
Hmm.
it almost feels like The Dark Knight wouldn't have been as prolific if he just started with that. Like Batman Begins, he kind of eased his way into it, and then he dropped The Dark Knight, and everybody's like, "This is the greatest superhero movie of all time." So I like,
Hmm.
and that's why I feel like if Sweet Insomnia came out
Yeah.
and then Ology come out, people would be talking about Ology like one of the greatest R&B albums of all time.
To like set up here, I can do more traditional R&B
Yep.
well, and then the next releases I'm going to shake it up. I'm
Yeah,
going to
because
switch it around.
and again, look at the album he lost to, Lemonade by Beyonce.
Hmm.
She didn't that wasn't her debut album, obviously. Like
Hmm.
it's kind of one of those things that's like it's all like it's not like you can't do something so good until you get to a certain point, but it's like building up momentum almost. Like I don't know if Gallant had the idea for Sweet Insomnia back in 2016. Like it might have just been something he came up with over 3 years after that. But like if I
Hmm.
was his manager, his producer, and he's like, so I got two albums, Ology and Sweet Insomnia. I would have been like, release Sweet Insomnia, and then we're gonna hit him with Ology.
If
That
you
would
had
have
a time,
been
if you had a time machine.
yeah, if only. If only. But I mean, like I said, regardless of where it came out in his career, um, just the themes of the album to me make it. And I was raised classic R&B, John Legend, a lot of Robert Glasper growing up, a
Marvin
lot
Gaye.
of Luther Vandross, Teddy Pendergrass. So, you know, I heard a lot of R&B. And this album does stand out to me as one of the greatest R&B albums of all time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's very high praise. What are some of your high points in this record
So
that
my
make it so
probably
special?
high points, no pun intended, is definitely Skipping Stones, which is my favorite song on the track.
Hmm.
And again, just from like a musician standpoint, Gallant, his voice, he goes so high. It's almost like shouldn't be physically possible for a man to do that with his voice. And he features Jhene Aiko. And it's like on the chorus, they're both singing. Gallant is singing at least one, if not two octaves higher than Jhene Aiko. And again, in R&B, just beyond what he's talking about, do aren't you don't do that in R&B. If you're an R&B artist, even John Legend, people like you when you feature someone on your track, if you feature a female vocalist, it's so she can sing the high parts and you can sing the lower parts because that's typically where males' voices resonate in the tenor range, and that way the female can do like some of the soprano alto notes. In this case, Gallant just completely flipped the script. Like when Jhene Aiko came in the studio and she's like, "Oh, you want me to go that high?" He's like, "Oh no, 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 don't worry, Jhene, I got that. You're just gonna sing the middle part." And she's like, "Okay," and her feature on that song was incredibly strong. I feel like it was perfect to have. This is the perfect album to only have one feature, and I feel
Hmm.
like I'm not sure for sure if Jhene Aiko wrote her own verse or how that all worked out, but it fit perfectly with the theme of the album, with the theme of the track, and with everything he's been saying throughout this entire masterpiece.
I think that might even be the highest note he hits is at the beginning of Skipping Stones, where he says, "Find me skipping stones."
Yeah.
It's so incredibly high, but I like that his energetic like spirit is really balanced off well with Janae, who has a very mellow
Hmm.
very mellow voice. I love her music. I think she is one of my favorite features on any track. I've said before about 21 Savage. I feel the same about Jhene Aiko. If I see her name as a feature, I'm immediately going to
I need to
listen
hear this song. Yeah.
with full attention because her voice is just that captivating to me. And I think they really have this interesting like balance and like this complementary feature that I'm glad that he doesn't have that many other people on this record. I'm glad it really can just showcase him, but the one they do have is like a perfect complement.
It really is. And and I feel like it really sums up the album as well. Because I know it's not technically the last song.
Mhm.
But I think and he released it as a single. So it's very interesting to release a single that kind of sums up the album.
Hmm.
before, people get to hear the entire album. But I definitely think it sums up a lot of the themes of just like, what am I missing? What am I searching for? Like, do I have, am I missing something spiritual? And because he talks a lot about religion on this album with bourbon and bone and tissue. Am I
Hmm.
missing something physical? He talks about that in Miyazaki and Perkajizik. Am
Hmm.
I missing something that's more like mental? He talks about that in Talking to Myself. He talks about that in I'm gonna come outside and open up. He
Hmm.
talks about all of these different assets, I mean, all these different facets to the human psyche and how, like kind of complicated we are, but at the same time, just what it's like to be on this journey with him is incredible. That's what it feels like.
Yeah, he's very thoughtful on it. I love the biggest track on here, Weight in Gold.
Hmm.
I love how he uses that very classic phrase, you're worth your weight in gold into a turning it into a negative. How burdensome that can be, how impossible that weight really is to lift on your own. I think he does it in a very simplistic but perfectly executed way that it's very easily accessible, I think, for anyone listening to it, and he gets his message across quite well.
Yeah, I mean, even the chorus, I'm pulling my weight in gold. Call me anxious, call me broke. And again, that's such a because we heard that term weight in gold before. And like
Hmm.
again, such a powerful metaphor. So this is the kind of thing that, you know, hip hop artists do. That,
Hmm.
people like Lupe Fiasco is known for taking a
Yeah.
common phrase and adding like, oh, call me broke because I'm pulling this weight, but I can't do it on my own. It's like I have this whole weight. And like that's so powerful because it's like because it's a weight in gold, but he still feels broke, as in like he's carrying all this gold, but it's not his. It's not even his, and he still has to carry it. And what
Hmm.
that is not adding value to himself.
Hmm.
Hence why he says, call me anxious, call me broke. I'm carrying all this emotional baggage, but that's not making me feel valuable. I don't feel valuable. And again,
Hmm.
when someone's broke, what is someone being broke? They are missing money. And that goes back to the themes that he sums up in Skipping Stones. What am I missing?
Hmm.
So good.
Absolutely. And then the very spiritual look with bone and tissue. I think that's
Mhm,
probably um my favorite chorus
mhm.
on the whole album. Sell me something I can use to catapult my value. Treat me like the cardinal anointed in my vessels. At any time I bite the hand that feeds, lie through your teeth and tell me I'm a monument to more than just bone and tissue. So so vulnerable.
Oh
That's
yeah.
that's it's so cutting. I
Mhm.
love it. If I falter on my oaths, will it prove that I'm more than skin and bones? Am I more than this?
Yeah,
Am I more than just my physical form?
and it kind of feels like I don't know if this is the same year that Hosier's Take Me to Church kind of came out. I can't remember. But that was a very like intense view of like church and religion. He's like, take me to church, I'll worship. He kind of says exactly what he means when he's singing that song. And he's also
Mhm.
liking it to, how much he's in love with this person that he considers like he's so in love with her that he considers her to be gospel. And it's like here, it's like it feels like Gallant gets so much deeper than that because
Mhm.
he's like, I want to fill this spiritual need that I have. I'm not like it feels like he's not saying like, oh, maybe I don't have it. He's like, I have it, but it's supposed to be being filled, but I'm not feeling it being filled. I feel like I'm being torn apart by this weight. And
Mhm.
it's such a deep exploration of religious themes. And I don't know if Gallant was raised religious or how or like what kind of inspired this, but
Mhm.
it's very powerful because it's not just I wouldn't even say it's close to being like a criticism or it's more of an exploration is what it
Mhm.
feels like.
Absolutely. And I think kind of a theme doing this podcast with you is really seeing how much you and I both really resonate with intimate and personal lyrics.
Oh
And I
yeah.
think Gallant is a very strong contender for some of the most like like personal and introspective. And
Hmm.
he even sets that tone. He sets that tone so well at the beginning with talking to myself. Literally, the first words we're hearing is, "I've been talking to myself lately. I've been asking for advice. I've been slowly losing my grip on this reality." Like
Hmm.
he is at a breaking point, it feels like. And it's so weird. I think to me, having an artist use that as their first album, like the first real introduction to the public, being this so like, I don't know who I am. I'm asking all of these large life-based questions and trying to figure myself out. To have that like be the first introduction to who he is, I think is so interesting and unique, but he makes it work. Like I
He
don't
really does.
we don't know Gallant before this, but it feels like we can glean it from the kinds of questions he's asking.
Yeah, and I mean, I love, you brought up talking to myself. I love the bridge of that song. How
Hmm.
my own molecules forsake me, atoms chained behind my back. And it's
Hmm.
like, what a powerful way to talk about how, the human brain, we can also often feel betrayed by ourselves, when we want to do things that we know that we shouldn't, or we think about things that we know that we shouldn't, or, it kind of reminds me of, because there's so many religious themes. It reminds me of the scripture where Paul is saying, like, I pummel my body and lead it as a slave. He's like, it's like it's a war between yourself. He's asking, like, how these are supposed to be my molecules, right? You're supposed to be on my side. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
you're supposed to be with me. And it's just such a um poignant and really relatable. And like I don't know for sure if Gallant has been through everything that he's talking about on this album, but I don't know how he could have written this album if it didn't come from something personal that he's been through. So
Sure.
maybe he just came up with it, because like how actors can like step into roles without having to actually gone through what their character has gone through, but I don't see how you can make something this incredible without having some personal connection to it.
And I think based on the albums that would follow this with Sweet Insomnia and Neptune, the fact that they aren't as necessarily introspective as this album
Hmm.
is, I think to me clues in that this isn't like an actor stepping into a role. This is Gallant. This is what he has dealt with and asked, and he used it to fuel this creative spirit
Hmm.
to make this masterfully made album.
Yeah, yeah. I still maintain my hypothesis, or I guess I don't even know what the right word is for it, but just I think if this was his sophomore album, again, we'd be talking about it in the same way that we talk about Lemonade or we talk about other great albums. Also, because if this had come out in 2019, I'm trying to think who was the competition for the Grammys for that one. That would have been "Cause I Love You" by Lizzo.
Hmm.
And I mean, that's a good album, don't get me wrong, but I don't see how it would lose to Ology if it had come out
Hmm.
in 2019. But, you know,
That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna put Ology against every album that's ever come out and see if it would win the Grammy that year.
I think that's my like you said it was very topical for that year, and I kind of
Hmm.
agree that it was topical for 2016, but like almost in the way that like I mean, I was still in high school when it came out, like almost like in the way
Hmm.
that I wasn't ready for Ology. I feel like the world wasn't ready for Ology. Like, you know, just to talk about it like in the same vein. But, like I said, now we can go back and listen to it and appreciate it so much. And some of those lyrics on Bourbon, which is another
Hmm.
deeply
Another one of your
spiritual
favorites.
track. Yeah, this probably one of my I think my favorites have to go Skipping Stones, Bourbon, and then Counting. Um,
Yeah.
because, you know, Bourbon talking about falling in the champagne quicksand, like such powerful, powerful imagery that he uses throughout this entire album. Um,
Hmm.
and Counting, I think Counting is the one that I love the melody. I think I like the production and the music aspect of that song most out of all
Hmm.
the other songs. Just the Because it fault lines. I'm not gonna start singing on this thing, but
Sure.
um, all those melodies and stuff, like all that production, like the production complements the melodies. I think that's the best from a musical standpoint. I think I have to say that's the best track. That's my favorite track from
Ooh,
that
okay.
standpoint.
I think for me, my favorites, but my favorite period was Bone and Tissue, far and away. I resonate very strongly with that track.
Mhm.
And then I really loved Perkajizik. I liked for how it felt like it kept its roots of R&B without feeling like a strictly R&B track.
Yeah.
Like if you had to sum it up in one genre, that's the genre I'd use, but that doesn't feel like the whole story. And I think that's what I like about some of his tracks here is he really does some interesting things that wear its influence strongly on their sleeves. And then finally, I really enjoy Shotgun. I really enjoyed that track early on.
Yeah. Am I biting the bullet? That it's just such good. And I mean, usually we go through these albums and we talk about like, are there any low points for you?
Mhm.
I'm like, do you have any low points? Because I'm
I
like,
don't think even for having some interlude tracks in here, like Oh Universe between Bone and Tissue and Weight and Gold, like I feel like it really fits to
oh
as a
yeah,
great transitional track from that heavy Bone and Tissue into the slightly more like the more classical R&B Weight and Gold. I think it serves as this really nice ambient 30-second piece to get you right into the mood for it.
and I mean, I'm like I've listened to it multiple times, and I'm like, there's got to be like one song in here that I don't like. Like Gallant didn't just make an album full of just straight bops, straight like hitters. Like no one does that. Everyone has something on the. Nope,
Nope,
nope.
not a
I
single.
was like Chandra, the last song. I tried it, and I was singing it the next day because it's so good. Every like I really can't even point to a low point because everything on here hits in such a specific vein and it brings the entire album to life.
Yeah. Yeah, I think re-listening to it, I thought I don't feel like I need to listen to this album as much in preparation, but I found myself doing it anyway because of how much I loved it. And I didn't skip a single one because it feels like they all flow together. You and I always we talk personally about how much like track order feels important
Matters.
to
Yeah.
like an album's layout. And I feel like this is a really solid track layout. Like I
Hmm.
love saving the feature of skipping stones till almost the last track. I love having that solid single with weight and gold right in the middle, and then having talking to myself be the entry point just feels like that's the right decision. Listening to
Hmm.
it, I don't think I would really play around with the order much at all.
I don't think I would affect it in the slightest. Like the ending of Jupiter goes directly into Open Up.
Mhm.
Um, and both of those are very powerful tracks. Um, and I think Perk of Jesus, I'm pretty sure that the production on the end transforms and goes into. I might be getting a mixed up. I think Perk of Jesus goes into Jupiter. That might be
Mhm.
it. And it's just like every single one, yeah, it is in the right order because he is literally discussing what's going on in himself in the correct order, and then he revisits those topics. So like it's like he starts with mental health, talking about talking to myself and shotgun, and then he goes into religious themes with bourbon and bone and tissue. And then
Mhm.
as it just keeps going on, it feels like it just becomes more layered without getting more complicated. And that
Mhm.
is a very fine line to walk. And I don't know how Christopher Gallant exactly did it, but
Mhm.
he did.
He did. I was looking through some of our old like text messages from back in 2016, believe it or
What?
not.
Are
And
you still on those?
something we had, I wish I had taken a screenshot. Maybe I can find it again. But something we had talked that I saw was um we said something along the lines of this album feels like it's asking a lot of questions without necessarily knowing all of the answers.
Yep.
And listening to it again, I feel like we were spot on with that one back then
Oh yeah.
because he brings up so many questions about himself without feigning any any greater knowledge and just trying to discover who he is.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's such a deep and great exploration. And it's like, and again, while the themes are very deep, it's hard not to say that like anybody can't relate to this because most people have had some kind of brush-in with religion. Most people have had some, everyone has mental health, whether you think you do or not. You have it. And you,
Mhm.
at some point, may have to confront it, anxiety, things like that. So it's like, while the themes are very deep and while he uses a lot of illustrations and metaphors to get across his point, anybody can relate to this album,
Mhm.
which is another part of what makes it so beautiful.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think we've covered it as much as we can.
Mhm.
Again, fantastic album. If you're listening to this podcast, first of all, thank you for listening, giving
My
us a chance
goodness.
to talk about what we love because we love music almost more than anything. Um, don't let our wives hear that. I'm just kidding. Um,
We thought
so
they were the only ones who listened.
right. So I guess now we just have to choose what are we going to talk about next week?
You know what? I say we just let it be. We let the universe decide. I say we should say it is what it is.
Hmm, it seems pretty good. I think
Yeah.
it definitely is what it is, and it actually looks like we're gonna get some thunder here in a little bit.
Oh,
It's gonna storm.
oh my God. I see it now. It's thundering, but is it thundering cats? This is
Ah! No, that
It
was
is what
different.
it is by
By
Thundercat.
Thundercat, yeah. I was gonna go for like the cloud looks like a cat,
Oh, okay.
but that's
Oh,
fine.
see, I
Raining cats
thought
and
it's
gods,
raining cats and dogs.
right?
Yeah.
And maybe that's where he got it from, but we'll explore all of that um next week
We'll explore the origin of his name.
of his name, and hopefully, if he hears that, he'll just skip over that part potentially. So yeah, thank you guys again for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on the ding notifications. That way you know every time we drop an episode. And if you have a album that you really want us to check out, let us know. Drop it in the comments. We'll always pick things, but if you pick something that maybe we haven't heard, we will listen to it and we will talk about it because that's what we do.
What we love. And
Hmm.
please listen to Ology by Gallant.
Oh
It
my
is worth
gosh.
every second of your day.
Every single second. Every single second. Thank you so much for joining us on Kingwell's album review party. And until next time, people.